All right, we're live. Okay, so welcome to the second day of the Eight Letters Lit Fest. So this is Cindy Wong. I'm your book curator. I'm one of the founders of Eight Letters, and I'm your host for today. And well, kung nakita niyo yung mga post namin kahapon, okay, we've already started posting some of the videos of our authors from the 31 Letters collection. And ayun, ayan. Marami nang nanonood sa atin ngayon. Yan, thank you so much for tuning in. And for today, our first talk, okay, today is going to be filled with webinars, workshops that will be useful for writers, okay, for writers and also for readers who are aspiring to be published authors in the future. So we have three webinars for today as well as tomorrow. I think merong dalawa. Okay, so I will have my talk later as well at 2 p.m. It will be about writing books with AI, and there's also author branding by Chris Santos. But for today, we're going to focus on, as you can see here, sa subject natin today, Talk Nerdy to Me with fantasy and sci-fi writers. Baka hindi kayanin ng brain ko to. Okay. But yes, as you can see here, we have two authors. Ayan. We have two gentlemen. Okay, I'm going to introduce them to you first before we get to know, we will give them time to discuss their nerdy stuff later. All right. So firstly, okay, we have David Chan. So he's an aquaphonic farmer and micro real estate developer by trade, co-founder of Steward Solutions, a community management services company serving both Web 2 and Web 3 clients. He's also a founder of Suwata, a nonprofit org focused on upskilling and empowering Pinoy storytellers, chairman of the original content sector of the Cebu Creative Entertainment Summit, working closely with the Cebu Chamber of Commerce and the Cebu City government, and he's a member of CCAP. Okay, he's a happy husband, part-time blogger, and a full-time cat slave. David Jan, can you please tell me how do you manage to write? You have so much in your portfolio. Okay, and okay, before I get him on stage, I'll also read a little bit more about Renato. Okay, so Renato Tranquilino is a Filipino-Australian IT professional who has an interest lang in sci-fi fantasy films and writing stories. Playing League of Legends is his other pastime. He dreams of traveling the world and visiting places of interest related to science fiction and urban fantasy novels. Okay, so let's get these two gentlemen on stage. Hi, David. Hi, Renato. How are you doing?
Hello. Doing good, doing good.
Hey, good.
Ayun.
Hello. Kamusta kayo?
Hello. Ayan.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for introducing us, Sidhu.
Okay, you're welcome. My pleasure. Okay.
Medyo may lag, pero okay ba?
Yeah, all good.
Yes.
All good.
All good.
Right. Yeah, I'm loving all of your backgrounds. Okay, I'm very on brand. So, okay, so konting chika-chika muna before we get to your discussion today. Can you give us an outline of what you're going to talk about? Kasi baka ma-intimidate yung mga nanonood sa atin ngayon. Like, what if I'm not nerdy? Okay, maybe let's start with David.
All right. Well, today I'll talk more about writer psychology. So a lot of writers have challenges when it comes to finishing their books, or they feel imposter syndrome, or they feel anxious, or they don't feel like they don't know what they're doing. So a lot of it is psychological, and writing a novel takes a lot of time and commitment. So what I want to talk about more has more to do with how to help writers actually make their stuff, finish their books, write their stories. So it's more on overcoming yung mga mental block, mga ganon. So it's more of that.
Wow, that will be very helpful for beginner writers or even to those writers na marami nang na-publish before and like stuck in the middle. How about you, Renato? What do you have for us today? Oops, Renato?
Well, there's something different. I guess it's more about... Hello? Okay.
All good.
Hi. So today is about using. Okay, cool. It's about using Philippine history and world history together to build worlds. And this is all to for the beginner writers of sci-fi or fantasy to allow, like especially the masa here in the Philippines, to connect with what you're trying to do. So a lot of my work has a lot of references to Philippine history, or Philippine events and whatnot. So we're gonna do a little bit of a fun thing today, and instead of just talk about bits about history, world history, and how it can be used effectively in a book. That's the thing.
Okay, okay, that's good to hear. So it's all about world building. I think it will be useful for fantasy or urban fantasy writers or sci-fi writers in the future. Ayan. So there you go. I think we're ready. We're ready for David. And in about 20 to 30 minutes later, we'll have Renato with us as well. Okay? All right. So you guys enjoy the show, and feel free to send the questions here in the comment section below. Okay, so send your questions, and then we'll have these guys here to respond to these questions. Okay, all right. See you, everyone, and the floor is yours, David.
Hello, hello, and thank you. Thank you very much, Cindy. All right, so I'm just gonna go straight into the topic because we don't have that much time, and I talk fast. But anyway, itong topic ko is about writer psychology. So we're gonna talk about how to help you guys finish your work essentially. And what I did with the PowerPoint that I have now is wala siyang animation. Every slide is the whole slide. So if for those of you guys who want to take screenshots, you can. The moment I change it, you can screenshot. That's the whole slide now. Wala siyang animations or anything. Okay? So we'll jump in. There are several psychological challenges for so many people. So, anxiety is the number one. And then there's also research paralysis, especially those who are doing fantasy, sci fi. They read a lot of books, they Google like crazy. And then, after research paralysis, they reach a certain stage where they become perfectionists. They want to make sure everything is perfect. Now, they don't feel like they can let their stories out until it's, like gold or golden already. And because of that, they feel the imposter syndrome hit next. The imposter syndrome tells them, oh, you're not good enough. Sino ka ba? Are you really a writer? Are you really a novelist? Oh, what do you know about this and that? And so they get so afraid the inspiration disappears, so they become museless. In other words, wala nang inspiration. Once that happens and it gets prolonged, this is the cycle. Nagkakaroon ng writing stump. So they quit writing, they stop writing, they just read, and then they just wish na lang, sana all nakaka-write. They forget that they have actually written stuff. And at the very end, they experience, once they try to get into writing, they try to start, they get mental block. Okay, so this is the common psychological challenges, and I listed them according to the cycle that usually happens to writers. So we're going to try to address all of these today. And I'm going to do a macro view of things. So let me do a little bit of self-introduction. These are all my IPs. When I say IP, I mean intellectual property. So these are my books, these are my novels. And so meron akong one saga, which is a 5-book saga, and then I've got 3 separate books and even more down the pipeline. What do I do? So like what Cindy has already mentioned, I do a lot of things. So I'm an aquaponic farmer, real estate developer. I do vlogging and all of that. But the big thing I really wanted to talk about is Suwata. This is the organization I founded, and there's a reason why I'm talking about this. Okay, so Suwata is a nonprofit organization, and we just help each other as storytellers. We hate the tribalism that goes on with a lot of these industries. What we want is for all storytellers to unite, and then we help each other out. We bring our stories out there, and we grow as a community and as an industry. Right now, to address the issues, to really jump into stuff, we need to ask the right questions. And when we ask the right questions, we get the right answers. And once we have the right answers, we have all the things we need in terms of our toolbox to get through and finish our book. So it's the why, who, where, when, what, and how. So macro view lang ako ha in most of them because we can actually do a deep dive into all of these, but it will take so much more than 30 minutes, even an hour. Okay, so let's go straight into it. Let's talk about the why. Psychological freedom. The reason why people or writers cannot really write or finish their stuff is they don't know why they're writing. So you need to know why are you writing. Others write for therapeutic reasons, di ba, yung therapeutic writing. Others, it's a hobby, it's a passion, they just cannot sleep until they write down their stuff. Others naman, they really want this to be a career. They want it to become an animated, an anime or a full-length feature film. They want a New York Times bestseller, etc. So you need to know your purpose because if you don't know your intention for writing, you'll never really push forward because you're always confused. So dito nahuhulog yung tinatawag na writer identity crisis. What kind of writer are you? Are you a career writer? Are you a hobbyist? What are you? Once that's clear, then it will direct your decisions and your behavior. So parang basketball players, diba? Like, if you are a hobbyist basketball player, then you'll eat what you want. You'll have your diet is how you want it to be. But if you are Michael Jordan or if you are a career athlete, then you will go to the gym regularly. You will exercise. There are certain things you cannot eat. There are certain things you cannot do, diba? Kasi career na yun. So what are you playing basketball for fun or as a career? Are you writing for fun or as a career? So you have to make this clear in your head. Okay, so yun. So that's what you have to understand is this. Your project can be so huge sometimes. So you need to know what it is about your project that you love so much that you would spend maybe 6 to 18 months on it. Because let's be real, novel writing can reach up to 18 months, even sometimes longer. All right. Now, if you've got a boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse who is supportive, that's great. But if not, then you have to make arrangements ahead of time as well. Okay, so ganun lang yun. Now, let's move forward. Clarifying your purpose for writing gives you psychological freedom to write what and how you want. So I've met some writers na the way they write, they don't care about prose. They don't care about their voice, their style, their genre. Wala lang, trip lang nila mag-write whatever. Why? Because it's therapeutic writing, and that's fine. So if you give them comments, they won't take it to heart. But there are those who what we might call career writers. These are people naman na they will really focus more on the corrections. They will focus more on the style, the genre, the writing tools, etc. So again, if you don't feel like you have psychological freedom, maybe it's because you're not yet sure of why you are writing. So that's something that you have to really think about. So knowing why you write determines which friends, voices, and groups you will entertain, invest in, and associate with. So if you are writing as a career, you might want to choose the friends who are very encouraging. Pag meron kang friends na nagsasabing, ano ba yan, writing, wag mo na lang gawin yan, do something else na lang, don't waste your time. These might not be the friends that you need in your life at the moment. Maybe keep them as movie friends. You hang out with them over movies, but don't talk to them about your career, your writing, and all of that. Okay, so you have to be very careful. One more thing that I want to say is this. Invest in yourself. So, let me just say this. Ako personally kasi, I did not graduate with any kind of literary degree or any literature, anything related to literature. I graduated legal management. So, but I really wanted to write. It was such a dream or a passion. So what did I do? I bought so many things. So these are the books I've actually bought. Forgive my thumb, my big fat thumb there. But basically, the first thing I really read was Writing Fiction for Dummies and The Lord of the Rings. My favorite novel saga of all time and my favorite author. And then I read all of those other things. Also, to continue, I got into these. If you see yung post-its on the side, the ones that are flying there, those are my notes. So invest in yourself. I want to add a little bit more about investing in yourself. Okay, so there are two events that I strongly recommend in addition to this one. So this online LitFest by 8 letters is absolutely superb. I love the idea, and I love that this is happening right now. And there are a few more. You might want to really take a look at this. One is on May 12 to 14, the IO event. So I strongly suggest that you take a screenshot of this, register, contact them, take a look, see if you can make it, because this is a really good event for writers, for storytellers. CCAP is going to help writers bring their stories out there into the world. And for those of you who don't have your stories done yet, that's perfectly fine. They will also have workshops there that will teach you how to write, how to finish your novel, different tools, different tricks of the trade. For others, you want to learn how to market it. Now, so there's something for everyone, for the beginner and for those who are already done with their IPs, their intellectual properties. There's something for everyone. Okay, so I strongly recommend that. The other one I would strongly recommend is the Cebu Creative Entertainment Summit. Please, please take a screenshot of this as well. This is going to be this coming August. Okay, so August. This will be bringing the entertainment industry of Cebu into the global market. If you want to know more about these two events and also Suwata, the organization, just send us an email at originalcontent2023@gmail.com. We'd be very, very happy to help. Okay, so invest in yourself. Buy the books you need to buy. It's great that you guys are here. You're listening to this online LitFest, so invest in yourself. Yung tanong nga, what to do if your family members are the ones who discourage you from writing, then just don't talk to them about your writing. You know, talk to other friends about writing and talk to your family about other stuff. So the trick is to always find your tribe, find your people, find the people who are encouraging, who are excited for you, who support you, and who are excited for what you're doing, people who believe in your work, and people who have the same or similar passions. So, yeah, talk about different topics to different groups of people depending on whether they're supportive or not, right? So, that's one of the things you can do. Okay, so the next question is who? This is exciting. So there are three kinds of writers, okay? There's the cats, the eagles, and the spiders, right? So let me explain each one. The cats. So are you a cat, an eagle, or a spider? The cat, the cats are spontaneous writers. They don't plan and they just get carried away by their fingers. So when they type, hala, everything goes everywhere. Their stories take a life of their own. They planned for this character to die and then suddenly the character lived. They planned for this character to fall in love with character C, but they fell in love with character G, right? So their draft is rapturous. Their first draft goes everywhere. The problem with this, so pros and cons. The pros, they finish very, very quickly. Okay, very quickly yung first draft. The downside for cat writers are editing is hellish torment for them because there will be so many plot holes. There's so many different plot directions na they're not sure where it's going. Okay, so there are cat writers. Okay, one example of a cat writer is Stephen King. Right, Stephen King, one of the cat writers. He would write stuff and then he would finish the first draft in 1 week. 1 week. In fact, I think it was him who said na there was one draft he wrote, he finished it in 1 day. So imagine, first draft, first day, done. Cat writers. The next one is called the eagle writers. These are macro writers. This is the most common of the writer types. Okay, they have a rough sketch of the beginning and the ending of their novel and the key scenes per chapter or act. So maybe they know their beginning, their ending, and then maybe 3 or 4 scenes in the middle that they already have in their heads. The first draft for them is relatively easy. But the moment their creativity jumps in, wala na, analysis paralysis na, they become frustrated, they become anxious, they start wondering if their whole story is going to make sense or not. They get a little paranoid, so these are the most common, the eagle or macro writers. So the cat, the eagle. The third one is the spiders. These are the meticulous writers. Everything is planned. Every scene, every act, every character, every event, roles, point of views, so everything. Nothing is left to chance. Not even loopholes. Except the one about why he who must not be named could not kill a helpless baby with a knife or a shotgun. Of course, I'm talking about Harry Potter. So, that is what happens when spider writers intentionally try to deviate from their style. All right? So, J.K. Rowling is actually a spider writer. In fact, this is J.K. Rowling's Order of the Phoenix plan. It was insane. So, they do it this way. They have an entire thing. If you guys are familiar with Game of Thrones, see George Martin, he was in an interview once and they asked him how did he map out everything, the different houses, the different places, the geography, etc. And he apparently has a file and he has a projector in his home. And he's got a gigantic wall. And when he turns it on, it projects the entire world on a giant wall in his house. So he sees everything on the wall. Okay, so those are spider writers. They plan everything. Obviously, another planner is my one of my top favorite authors, Tolkien, Lord of the Rings. Planned everything like crazy. J.K. Rowling, on the other hand, she originally planned for Harry, Potter, and Hermione to get together in the end. But she decided last minute that she wanted to change things because she wanted to intentionally deviate from her plan. And what happened? Ron and of course we know what happened. Ron and Hermione got together, and Harry and what's her name, the other girl, got together. And what happened in the end was a lot of fans did not like it. So um, this just goes to show sometimes when you already have a plan, just stick to it and you will eventually have what most people would enjoy. Right? So that's what happened. Right? So moving forward, there are also two kinds of styles when it comes to writing. There are character builders and there are world builders. So character builders are people who love building characters. They dwell so much on character development, character changes, character growth, and all of that. World builders naman focus so much on the world, the different religions of this world, so mostly on fantasy. So you've got people like, for example, George Martin or Rowling, or those kinds of, or those types of writers. You fall in love with the world itself. Okay, so what kind of writer are you? Are you a cat? Are you an eagle? Or are you a spider? Are you a character builder, or are you more of a world builder? Some do both, but there's usually a fixation. Okay, so I know what I am. I am an eagle writer and I am a world builder. So that's what I am. I'm an eagle world builder. So different people have different styles. And so knowing your style, knowing your typology, your writer typology will help you very much. So here are two examples. Character builders, Dracula. Bram Stoker's Dracula is so good on character building, and he does it in such a unique way. World builder, very obvious, Lord of the Rings. Okay, so those are two huge examples. All right. So yun, people already are posting on the comment section what they are, and which is great. The more you know what kind you are, the easier it will be for you to finish your book. Now, your writer typology will also influence your point of view preference. Most of the time, character builders love the first person perspective. So if you think about that, you'll probably end up thinking of Twilight. That's the most popular. Until today, it's still one of the most popular. So Twilight, it's very, very first person perspective. Now, if you read something else, like maybe world builders like Ursula Le Guin's A Wizard of Earthsea, another tremendously wonderful book, it is third person, right? So usually it's first person or third person. So you can take a screenshot of this as well. Some people, they jump, others they do head hopping. So it depends on you and your style. I suggest focus on either first person or third person. The rest are more for advanced style of writing. Okay, so that is the who. Know what kind of writer you are. Sometimes there's a mix. I am actually more of an eagle towards the spider. I am not spontaneous at all. I tested it. I tried just letting things go. And then when I got to maybe the third chapter of the first draft, I could not move forward because my brain, by default, just immediately created beginnings and endings. And so I went back to my eagle type, to the world building side. Okay, so you can be a mix. Okay, you can be a mix. Right? So next, let's talk about the where. This is also very interesting. You need to know your creative spaces and your polishing spaces. What do I mean? You have to ask yourself, where are you most productive? Coffee shops or caves? Ako personally, when it comes to writing, I love writing in loud coffee shops with people talking and plates clanging, and I see life happening. So it has to be in a coffee shop, outdoors with a nice cup of coffee, and everyone's noisy. I love that. Okay. So do you write best when you're on Red Bull, you're caffeinated, jet lag? Do you write best at night or in the morning, midday? You gotta know. You have to know. Are you more, maybe it's not about the writing, it's the medium. Are you more of typing or handwritten? I know some people who still use handwritten stuff, so pencil, paper, and all of that. So you just have to know. And here's the other thing you have to know. You have to know if you are creating or polishing. In other words, are you making a chaotic first draft or are you editing? Ako personally, I already know for myself. Whenever I'm creating, I want things chaotic. But when I'm editing and polishing, I want things quiet. It will be my room, quiet, the hum of a air conditioner or electric fan, no noise, no background whatsoever, kahit music, wala. When I'm editing. But when I'm writing first draft, I want everything noisy. Okay, so the more you know these things, the better. I know of an Indian writer, which is very interesting. I was in one of those workshops, and there was this Indian writer, and he said he could not write until he went to a workshop abroad. And so he was jet lagged. When he got jet lagged, he was able to write several chapters of his book. And then when he got home, he got jet lagged again and he wrote several chapters. And so he realized he's great at writing when he's jet lagged. And I thought, grabe naman, how expensive you need to be jet lagged to actually write. So travel halfway across the world. Hindi naman siguro kailangan ganun. But, you could test out different things. Try drinking coffee, try drinking Red Bull. So it depends. Different things for different people. So know your creative spaces and your polishing spaces. Just FYI, for those who are in Cebu, I just want to bring this up. There is going to be a Cebu Creative Hub. It is a place for creatives, writers, storytellers. It is right across Harold's Hotel. Harold's Hotel, okay, across Harold's Hotel, behind Eden's Place, that arcade. It has a huge sign, La Buona Italian Restaurant. Now, right beside that is the Creative Hub. There is cheap coffee there and cheap food, mga tosilog, mga silog-silog. And the coffee is going to be like 60 pesos, 50 pesos. And the owner told us they're going to make the coffee even 20 pesos or something like that. So it's going to be a nice place for us writers to just hang out. We have sa Swata. Swata, I'm the founder of Swata. We partnered with the Cebu Creative Hub. And we have a spot there for Swata people already, Swata members. And we have weekly meetups, we have writer jams, we have write sessions, and all of that. So, guys, if you're in Cebu, join Suwata, please, and let's go nuts together, okay? And we'll meet there and we'll just caffeinate ourselves. All right. So, yun. So there's a space for us now in Cebu, right? Next, I love I love this. Yung sinabing, I can write every time I'm overly happy or sad, but mostly if I'm sad. I can't help but think of Taylor Swift. When she breaks up, she writes a song. Um, but really, that's very possible because a lot of times we write when we are in touch with our emotions. And sadness is a very, very strong, powerful emotion that lingers. Happiness, kasi it doesn't linger. So there's more to that. Oh gosh, if we go deep dive into this, there's okay, I'll talk a little bit about that here. So physiological chronotypes. So some of you are familiar with this already. It's your sleep patterns. Okay, so bear, lion, wolf, and dolphin. You can take a screenshot of this just so you already know what type you are. Um, Most of the time, creatives are nocturnal people. They are awake at night most of the time. Okay, and there's a reason. Psychologically, you're awake at night because nighttime, evening, the mood itself, lack of light, and all of that dim lights, it gives us that melancholy emotional state. And that state lingers. And because that state lingers, we go deeper into our emotions. And that helps our creativity. Right? So a lot of times writers tend to write at night. All right. So that's a very normal thing. So just know your chronotype with your sleep patterns, so you will know when you are most productive. So, for example, for myself, I already know for myself, I am mostly like a bear slash lion. Okay, bear slash lion. So I'm awake at during the day. I am a very very happy morning person. When the sun is up, I am humming and all of that. But my writing time, okay, my writing time is usually right after lunch. I look for a coffee shop somewhere, and then like that. So it depends on you. It depends on you. You just have to know. A lot of times, the reason why writers don't cannot write is not because they're not skilled. It's just because they don't know themselves well. They don't know their chronotype. They don't know their writer typology. They're trying to be a spider when they're a cat. They're trying to be an eagle when they're a spider. Things like that. So find out about yourself, and the more you know about yourself, the more you will see your productivity skyrocket. Okay. So more stuff you have to know. Try this. Maybe some of you write best after a shower. I know this because I'm that. If I haven't showered yet, it's difficult for me to write or be productive. I need to take a shower first, and for some reason, and here's what happens when you take a shower, especially if you use your temperature of the water, you acclimate your body temperature, and that helps your mind. Okay, so others, they are best when they just came from the gym, they exercise, that gets the adrenaline going, the dopamine levels are high. Others, they write better when they're full, when they just ate a lot, they write better. Others naman, they want to be mid hungry. Others write better with some alcohol or wine. Others drink coffee. Others even drink espresso. Others drink Red Bull. Know what physiological state you're in that makes you a more conducive, productive writer. Right? So try that. I love the posts here in the comment sections. I agree. Some of the best ideas I have also that I have came from the shower, and I force myself to write the entire time I'm awake. Yeah. Sometimes you can chill. Sometimes you can force yourself. So it really depends. So yun, you're seeing already in the comment section, different people have very different um, patterns and types. Si Sir Renato talaga. That is so true. Bring a notebook wherever you go, because you have no idea when you have an idea, right? So yeah, just bring a notebook everywhere. So ganon. Um, One other thing I would strongly suggest is this: buy a planner, use your planner, obey your planner, then reward yourself. Why? Because if you look at this triangle, the biggest is really the brainstorming phase, the research phase. And when you have this triangle, you will already know what you should focus on. And so the best way to do these things is to plan them. When you have a planner, you already, because okay, so here's what happens. For example, some people say, I'm always stuck at the research phase, I'm always paranoid, I always research, I always research, I always research. You know what? Just buy a planner and then use it. So you write down, this time I will research, this time I will write, this time I will edit, this time I will polish. So you're already planning your schedule. In fact, here's something I got from one of the master classes. I've attended several master classes. I don't remember who said it and when, but I remember what was said. Finish your first draft first. Don't worry that it will suck. Accept it will suck. I think it was Neil Gaiman. Yeah, Neil Gaiman said it this way: your first draft will be shit, okay, and just accept it. So write your first draft, go nuts. Even if there's so many details that are missing, it's fine. Just highlight it or something. So when you're done with your first draft, start researching more, and then just edit and polish. Right? Just accept na pangit talaga yung first draft, okay lang yan. So what I did personally was I brought out my planner and then I planned everything. Like, when will I research? When will I write? When will I polish? When will I edit? When will I research again? And then when I'm finally done with the whole draft, I'll be done with the whole thing. That is how some writers, especially career writers, are able to pump out a book a year, because they have planned the whole year. It might even be helpful to just sit down for one whole day, just block the whole day, invest one whole day, And all you do for that whole day is fill up the planner, prepare yourself, and plan when you will finish the entire first draft in 1 year's time. And I guarantee you, you will feel very productive and you'll be able to really finish stuff. Okay, so buy a planner, use it, obey it, then reward yourself at the end of the year, or maybe at the end of every week or at the end of every month. If you're able to follow your planner for the entire week, reward yourself. Go only wings or shabu shabu or something. Okay, so yun. What? Almost done. The what? Many times writers get paranoid because they don't focus on the genre, the style, and the voice. And again, this is macro view. I won't go deep into them. But you gotta know, what's your genre? Mystery, thriller, romance, fantasy, sci-fi, madami yan. For me, I already know I am an urban fantasy sci-fi writer. That's it. I have a little bit of romance, a little bit of thrill, a little bit of mystery, but I'm an urban fantasy sci-fi writer. That's it. So you gotta know your genre because when you know your genre, you already know what you can focus on. So the next thing you have to, oh, okay, wait, before that, I just want to promote this because it is such an underrated book. This is one of my favorite books of all time, ever, ever, ever. Frank Peretti, This Present Darkness, and the sequel, Piercing the Darkness. The goal of every novel kasi is to give your readers a powerful emotional experience. I kid you not, when I was reading these books, I literally threw the book across the room and then I panicked because I forgot what page I was in. I literally threw the book across the room. I was like, no, and then ay, what page am I in? This is such a great book for me. So why am I talking about this? It's because many times as writers, we focus so much on telling the story, we forget that the goal of our writing, if you want to be a career writer, is not so much it's not just telling your story, but making sure that your reader has an emotional experience. Okay, so focus on emotional experience that your readers get. That is how your career as a writer will actually fly. Right. Next, there are two kinds of adrenaline. What kind of writer are you? Do you prefer writing non-stop action or the slow burn? So ako personally, I know what I am. I am the non-stop action guy. I love just non-stop boom. After several chapters, if nothing is happening, I get bored. I need to see a fight scene. I need to have battle scenes. I need to have explosions. So you have to know. Okay, so here's a trick. You can outline your chapters. And this is what I did personally. When I wrote my books, I wrote an outline of my chapters. And I highlighted every chapter that has an action scene, a battle scene, a fight scene. If I see that there has been 4 or 5 chapters with no highlights, then I already know, patay, something is wrong. Because no action is happening after 5 chapters, 6, 7 chapters, no action scene. That's gonna bore your people. If you're trying to do a urban fantasy sci-fi action film, or not, sorry, not film, book, or do you like stretching tension? If you like stretching tension, then you have to keep teasing and teasing and teasing, and every chapter has to have that tease. So that's something we have to really think about. Know the kind of writer that you are. Do you stretch adrenaline, or do you keep adrenaline coming every chapter, every flick of the page, right? So yun. Um, these two books that I mentioned, these two, Frank Peretti is so good because he does both. Okay, so he's a world builder and he's a character builder, and he has so much action, and yet there is an ongoing tension that he keeps prolonged as an undercurrent. That's why this guy is an insanely good writer. Okay, so I would put him at par with Tolkien and Ursula Le Guin. Right, so yun. Next, 7 tools of fiction. Please, please, please don't forget these. I'm not saying you should use all of them equally, but a lot of writers, uh, they forget about this. So I'm also a part-time developmental editor. Okay, part-time, but I haven't done it in a long time because I'm focused on my own work now. But a lot of developmental editors will always look at these seven and they will always go, huh, they would sometimes go, too much blank or not enough blank. Or maybe a foreshadow is needed somewhere, a flashback is unnecessary, there's too much narrative summary, there's not enough description, or maybe there's too much gratuitous description, or maybe even sometimes you're trying to write a PG-13 book, but your descriptions are, R18 and even above, right? So you have to look at these factors so you can decide for yourself. I'm not going to go so much into these, but also take a look at the characters. Take a look at character objects, So I won't go deep into them, but certain characters will always have their objects. Some characters will always have scars or hugots. Other characters will always have a goal that they're obsessed with or values and convictions. And some characters are so tied to these objects, scars, goals, or convictions that if you take these out or separate them, you'll break the character. So, no one effective way of breaking a character is breaking one of these factors of the character. So you have to know when to utilize these well. So imagine na lang, Samurai X, Kenshi Himura, and his reversed edge sword is broken, right? You break his sword, you break his character. If Batman loses this or that conviction, then patay na. Like you just you broke the bat. So you have to know when to break certain characters, okay? You also need to know your scenes. I will not go into this. You can take a screenshot of this. I'm sure that you guys already know this. It's just a reminder. Know when you're supposed to go back to this, revisit this, maybe fix some of your scenes. Many times the problem with writers is um, they they don't know what's wrong with a scene. They just know something's wrong with it, but they cannot pinpoint what is wrong with it. Take a look at this. Maybe if you do a surgery of a scene, you'll realize where it's wrong. Then you can fix it and edit it and polish it well. Okay. Uh, of course, broaden your mind, please. Don't try to write about something you don't know much about. Focus on your own experience. This is why, as writers, we need to really invest in ourselves. If you want, you can even travel. Go explore the Philippines. We have 7,107 islands, depending on high tide or low tide. So travel and broaden your experiences. Get to know different things, and you will realize that your writing is directly influenced by your experiences. So invest in yourself. Lastly is the how. I'll go through them very quickly, just very macro view. The first one is mental block. How do you conquer mental block? Personally, I have not experienced mental block for the past several years after I learned this one trick. Before you even sit down, decide, are you going to create or are you going to edit? Are you going to create chaos, which is going to suck, but at least your draft is done? Or are you going to edit? Mental block happens when your right and left brain, your left brain is actually very logical. Your right brain is very creative. If you sit down without deciding beforehand what you're going to do, your right brain and your left brain don't have clear instructions. Am I writing to polish or writing to create? Is it going to be right brain focus or left brain focus? If there's no clear instructions, they will fight, and that is when mental block happens. So before you sit down, decide. Before I go to that coffee shop, before I go to Bose Coffee or wherever, or the Creative Hub, am I going to write to create or write to edit? Once that's clear, you will not have mental block. I guarantee it. Because I have not had mental block for the past 4 or 5 years. Okay? So that's how to cure mental block. If you don't feel inspired, you feel useless, focus on your writing as a career, view it as a career, and routinize it. So if you routinize your job, you can routinize your guilt. How does this work? If you have a routine, let's say every Thursday I will sit down for 1 hour to write, and you sit down on Wednesday to write. Even if you don't write anything, waste that 1 hour. I kid you not, waste it. Once you have wasted 100 Wednesdays, 100 Thursdays, once you've wasted 28 weeks, you're going to feel so guilty that your guilt will push you to write. So you can utilize your guilt. All right. So that's one of the ways you can do it. This actually happened to me. I wasted 2 months without writing, but I felt so guilty already wasting my time. And then there was this one day that I finished like I think 6 chapters, plus edited mga 3 chapters all in one sitting. So it can happen. Okay, and that's happened to me several times. Never ending research or edits. Simple answer to this is to plan your progress. So again, use your planner. Buy a planner, use it, obey it, and then reward yourself. That's the very simple fix to your never ending research. Okay? Next, distractions. Simple. Find your creative space. In fact, one thing you can do if you plan to really write, if you are a laptop writer, go to a place with no Wi Fi. Leave your phone in the house. And if you leave your phone in the house, I guarantee you, you will feel so guilty not writing and you will have nothing else to do. You will write. The one trick I always do is to just leave my phone if I want to write. Just leave your phone. That's it. Go to a place with no Wi-Fi. You will surely write. Right? So yun. If you fall in love with an out of place character, the OOP, you're an out of place character, an out of place scene, here's a trick. Save it. Save that character for a sequel or a different project. Save that scene for a different project or for a sequel. Why? If they are as good as you say they will shine brightest where they belong. Don't force them in a place where they're out of place, because they will not shine. You will feel like you've wasted them, and that, like, it's not like you're gonna write one IP for the rest of your life, naman, diba? It's not like you're gonna have one intellectual property and then you'll die. It's not like that. You're gonna write other intellectual properties. You're gonna have other stories. So save your scenes and save your characters where they belong. Okay, so just treasure them. How about this? Overwriting, over explaining, over narrating, over describing. First, just clarify again your intention for writing. Is it therapeutic or is it for a career? Revisit the tools and get a good developmental editor. Your developmental editor will help you with the overwriting problem. And my suggestion, get a developmental editor after you're done with the entire first draft. Okay? Don't waste your money before that. Finish your first draft first. Don't overwrite. Just finish your first draft. If you have to overwrite, then sige na lang overwrite. Then let the dev editor fix it for you. Okay? After the first draft is done. Save your money. If you have multiple IPs or ideas and projects, I would strongly suggest examine your soul age or your maturity and deepen your IP pipeline. Maybe you've got an idea, but you're not mature enough to write it. So, ako personally, I have an idea notebook. And in my idea notebook, I have 7 other intellectual properties. Ideas, concepts, worlds, and stories, but I don't plan to write them anytime soon because I know that my maturity has not reached there yet. I don't have the vocabulary. I have not read enough. I have not experienced enough of life. So just keep it as an idea for now. Don't force yourself. And I noticed that my writing has evolved and has changed over the years, and yours will too. So don't be afraid to keep them, reserve them, and prepare yourself for the future. Reminder, I love this saying, get it written before getting it right. In other words, your first draft will suck. Accept it, it's totally fine, just right. Okay, so get it written before getting it right. Once you have this mindset, you will finish your first draft for sure. My suggestion is even this. Finish your first draft without editing at all. Why? Once you finish your first draft without editing at all, you will experience this level of achievement and excitement because your first draft is done. You will be even more inspired to edit and to polish. So you are taking care of your own psychology. Keep reading and writing, and of course, set a deadline to reward yourself or to even punish yourself. We're almost done. This is the second to the last slide. Writing is a subconscious obsession. And I use that word intentionally, obsession, and it's fueled by the books you read and your God-given imagination. So if you want to be a writer, keep reading, keep writing, keep at it lang. Just don't stop. When you read, you end up expanding your own vocabulary. You hone your skill by writing, and so they go hand in hand. Stimulate your imagination. Play Dungeons and Dragons and similar games. Play board games. I strongly suggest you play role-playing board games. Play those video games. Watch crazy movies. Read everything and write everything. And I just want to say thank you. That second to the last slide, yung kanina. So this is the last slide. Thank you guys. And this really is everything. I hope you guys got something. I know I went through it very quickly because it's a lot. Macro lang ako. All right. So yes, Warhammer and Genshin. So those count. Just make sure you're not wasting time also pag nasobrahan. All right. So yeah, but that's really it for me. I hope you learned something. And again, if you want, just let's get connected. And if you're in Cebu, join Swata. See us in the Cebu Creative Hub. And yeah, let's write together and help each other out.
Testing, testing. Hi. Just hang on a second. Hello, everyone. How are you? Yes, I'm Renato. I think something was just cut off. Like I think David was just saying thank you. Hiya, can I get you to switch off the streamer first before I start? Hi, Julia. Hey, everyone. So I'm just waiting for Hiya to respond. Dun, 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 dun. How's everyone going? How was the holidays? I hope you guys are all fired up after the holidays and ready to go. Um, and so, what we're going to do today is basically just it's more of a chat that like with regards to Philippine history and world history and how we use it for world building. Um, just a second, I please switch off the streamer. Okay, so it's gonna be it's going to be very general because a lot of you probably already know how to world build and whatnot. So what I'm doing today is actually give you an example of what how I use these tools as a uh, in my stories. So I'm just waiting for them to for Aya to switch off the streamer so we can get going. So if you got any questions for me, feel free to shoot, and I'll answer them as we wait for someone to fix the issue. And so, how many of you here are from the Philippines, and how many are out from outside the country? Um, so, I grew up in Australia, and but I've been living here now since 2014, and it's really good. Now I had to switch off my background because things were going wrong with my with my internet speed. So here we are. All right, let me see what's going on here. We're just having my presentation slide is not on the screen as yet. Ah, from the Philippines. Hey, Julia. All right. Now, can we have someone just switch off the streaming on the background? Philippines. All right. Okay. So, whereabouts in the Philippines, guys? Cebu, Manila. Um, thank you. All right. Well, we're in business. So, okay. Now, so for everyone in the Philippines, so everyone here is okay for me, like to talk in English. We'll get through a lot of things much quicker. But every now and then I might switch to Tagalog just for clarification in terms of some of the aspects of it. So here we go. Like, welcome to Philippine and World History for World Building. So that's, and I'm your host. I can get this thing going. Renato Tranquilino. Yay! Thank you. So let's start with the first slide. Why use history? Um, Lisa. Oh yeah, okay. So why use history? Well, everyone has their own style. You should never be afraid to, as David said, never be afraid to use your own way of writing your story. Okay, so because I like it. All right, so that's history play. Using history. I love history. So if you're going to write a story, might as well write what interests you. Yeah, because the flow lot of your story will go much faster if it's something that you like. And growing up in Sydney, so I was really into ancient history, like ancient Egypt, that sort of thing, and world wars. Predominantly the battles in World War, the techniques that they used and whatnot. Um, so all that, like, I tend to use as either background or I build on it and project that kind of culture, image, something out out in space or out in a colony somewhere. So the reason why I do that is because it allows you to connect, allows me to connect with the people that that's reading my stories. You know, in terms of especially when I'm describing, say, a particular technology or the background for that particular technology. When you put images from history, people, especially ones that are not used to reading sci-fi, they can connect things a bit more. So it helps them appreciate your story and understand your story a lot more. So that's one of the things that I why I use history. So okay. The other thing that's very common when you use history as part of your world building is we all know that history repeats itself. So what does that mean? It's evident because as long as you have humans in your story, they're always going to do dumb things over and over again. I mean, that's just we've seen that in the world, and we've experienced that in just the day to day. So your story, no matter how boring you might think it is, or how similar it is to a story written like 50 years ago, if you're writing a sci-fi story, I can almost assure you that event or that level of stupidity that character is gonna either make happen in the future is gonna be based on something that's happened in the past. So feel free to choose which event you you um, you want to talk about in the future, because most likely you're gonna be almost 80 to 80 to 90% correct that it's going to happen. We're gonna That's going to keep recurring in this presentation later, and how you'll see what I mean. I know this is probably harping on something that you already know, but the thing with history is that once you know more about it, then you're not going to get shocked in terms of what's about to happen in the future. And it's also a lot of fun when you know how the trip is. You think the trip is going to be, unless the writer kind of flips the page on you, oh, like twists it, So which is kind of cool too. Ackland feels cool. Um, so let's see. Human drama with advanced text. So I always say that when you're doing sci-fi, right? A lot of people think it's very nerdy and it's about science, rockets, blah blah blah. But when in the nutshell of it, when you read about sci-fi and fantasy, it's really like modern day issues, but with rockets or with spaceships or with UFOs or with aliens. So it's always like you get in fantasy, it's battle between good and evil, that sort of thing. And so with monsters and dragons and whatnot. So that's why I think it shouldn't be viewed as by readers or new readers of fantasy and sci-fi. Like these stories, like especially with backgrounds of history, that's how you would enable them to view it more of a ride, I guess, because they can connect to it, and so the whole dragons and spaceships and things become just an add-on fun for them as they decipher the human drama behind what we're writing. It's even better if you have history behind it, because then they can really connect. Oh my God, that happened like 200 years ago, based on what we're seeing here in this book. One example of that is, I guess, the Sword of Shannara. When I started I started reading Sword of China when I was still living in Sydney. When I was a kid. I think I must have been 15, 16. So, Sword of Shannara, you're reading it and you know you're supposed to be reading like fantasy, but it's weird because it's got fantasy and tech, and then as you slowly read it, you notice that there are like references to places that were once Earth. So it was actually happening on Earth, but it's maybe thousands upon thousands of years into the future. And so you have they have these references, like very very slight references that make you go, oh, so it's just kind of cool. So things like that, if you inject like history like that in your story, makes it a lot more fun because people can latch onto something that's like, oh yeah, that's I remember that, you know. So safe and won't get you killed. Well, I think this is more for the Philippines. You know, it is here medyo pikon, like maraming pikon. And so when you write stories about sci-fi and fantasy, especially if it has an underlying message of say how to improve the country, you don't want to do it that's too close to today's time because you might offend someone, and and it can bring about like either banning your book, which is the worst thing, if they don't like the kind of messaging that you have there. But if you're writing it like 2,000 or 3,000 years in the future, it's kind of a non-issue. Um, so I have reference, like in some of my books, I've referenced things in the country, but they said like anywhere from 500 to 3,000 years into the future. Uh, and again, it comes back to this thing that I believe that history repeats itself. So the problems that we're having now, most likely we'll have it again in the future, unless something is drastically done about them, um, or there's a specific alteration in the way we behave as a culture, then I suspect that the same problems we've got now will continue right into the 1,000 years or 2,000 years. Um, but the one thing that you can do when you use history is, of course, you can not only like provide entertainment to Pinoys and introduce Pinoy sci-fi or Pinoy fantasy like to them. You can also educate them. So the future is not really set in stone, but you can provide the building blocks in the minds of people today, so that things can be put in place to take us to where we should be, instead of just following um, others, or other countries, and just copying what they do. We can start to create our own. You know. Um, right. Next up. Any questions, people? Are you falling asleep? Anyone falling asleep? Wake up! So, uh, before we go on to the next slide, like I'm happy to answer any questions at this point. So, all right, watching the comments. Okay. Next up. All right, so this is like a picture from the Battle of Leyte Gulf. So, um, so you can use something like that, like when the return of uh, the defending armies and all that in the Philippines, uh, and then of course in one of the books I've written, I've used the Tower of Babel as a reference point for a climactic battle scene. Well, it's not so much a Tower of Babel; it's what's in it. So you can put a sub story on, you know, to the actual like event or to the actual building, the architecture. You can write your sub story in there, which makes it far more interesting, especially for someone reading sci-fi or fantasy, a story within a story, which is Yeah, it's just kind of cool. Um, so what's next? What are the paths to use of history? What if our setting is set in another galaxy? Nah, that's Estelle. Yeah, you're okay. Because you can take the premise of of our history, say take Philippine history, and you can use like alien characters and have them act out the entire scene. It's still gonna be cool. And then when you're doing your promotion, 40K, yeah, that's right. And then when you're doing your promotion, you just like drop that on him. Oh, by the way, did you know that this was about like the Tower of Babel or something like that? So people love that. They go, "Oh my God, really? Yeah, that's cool." Okay, what parts to use of history? I always go by go big or go home. Like has to be dramatic. Make it dramatic. Like don't be scared to use like any weird like history or very controversial. The more controversial, the better. Okay, let's take for example, Nanjing Treaty of 1842. That's like that's the background of that is the Opium War. This is like drug lords, countries acting as drug lords, okay, fighting against each other. The Chinese lost, and then as a result of that, Hong Kong was taken by the British. The British were the biggest drug lords at the time, so they didn't like that China was muzzling in on their action. Even though it's their own opium that they're producing. So they got upset and they had the war. Like, yeah, part of world building is the hardest to do. Okay. Well, I mean, with world building, it's always got to start off with what can you imagine? What do you imagine your world to be? I think that's the hardest part to get to. Are you going to build a world from scratch, or are you going to use a template of such a world? Um, Even though, like, take for instance us humans right now, okay? Like, even though we're like this, it doesn't mean that there are a more advanced civilization like us that don't behave like this. Okay, they might be more warlike, but they're using more advanced weapons to kill each other. Okay, like nukes would be like nothing for them. They might even be able to nullify the effects of nukes. So nukes is a nothing for them. But they use deatomizers and stuff. So whole cities will just be reduced to dust. That sort of thing. So imagine how your imagination is key. And so to imagine a world, first you probably need to think about like how grand you want it to be. Like, is it going to be based on our history? See, if it's okay, we're talking history here. So to me, it's easy if you base it on history. You base it on, say, Philippine history, okay? How we created, and we're going to get to that in probably in a couple of slides. Where jumping ahead here, but see, the Philippines is like an archipelago, right? So has a lot of islands, lots of culture there. Before the Spaniards came, it's like Europe of Asia, right? So you're gonna build a world, say, made of like multiple islands, like massive islands or something, and with their own resources. You're really talking about the Philippine archipelago. You can project the Philippine archipelago into massive lands that have their own cultures within it, like 2,000 years in the future in a far distant world with aliens in it, and it'd still be the stuff that we're going through right now will be just magnified like maybe 1,000 times over there. So there you go. um, okay, so kind of like what I said, so you got to read about, if you read about the history of the Philippines and the geostructure, the architecture, and all that sort of stuff that we have here, and how we've been effectively colonized by multiple countries, then you can kind of form an idea of how your world is going to be based on us, and then project it. Like, um, 2,000 years into the future, or into a totally different planet, different environment, different everything. I mean, you can make it fun. Um, but the underlying thing is, if it's based on, if you based it on the Philippines, you have a far better grasp of the environment. Yeah, it's like a no. Okay, let's just right. So, okay, one that has a solution, controversial, no worries. What I mean by this is, so for instance, you pick a story that sounds great and people like it, but there's a backstory to that that's not really all that good. Um, let's take for instance, hey, everyone talks about how wonderful Australia was, and like how it is now. It's a progressive country and whatnot. But it wasn't always like that. I mean, it was like where convicts were dumped. When I studied Australian history, when you were sent to Australia for a petty crime in England, because they can't send prisoners anymore to America, because America then has already become independent. So they have to find another place to dump their prisoners. If they send you to Australia, that's it. You're dead. Like you're not coming back at all. Okay. They at the time when Australia was discovered, I should know when, because I forget the moment, like the date. Um, when you get bit by a snake, there was no antivenom, because they have not the snakes in Australia at the time, like was basically, they haven't found a cure yet. There were insects that when they bite you, their venom dissolves your flesh, so all that's left is bones. So effectively, if you can't stop it quickly enough, it will eat away your hand, and it's a class of termite, I think, and so it squirts out this acid, and it just eats away everything. That's the defensive mechanism as well too, like against predators. Um, One thing is something about floras and faunas. Okay, so you have like if you look at if you study Australia, like in the early days, the colony days of England, when they would discovered all these plants and animals and marsupials, how platypuses can lay an egg, and it's a mammal. So you have all these oddities, and so I tend to use that kind of thing in my stories, just something weird like that. Um, and But the thing is, these people actually experienced all this. The cute little platypus, the one that told you that lays an egg, if it scratches you, it has poison in its claws that'll really make you sick. And the same with koalas. So you don't ever let the koalas, even though they're sleepy, you don't let them scratch you. Um, in Australia, well, yeah, but we kind of tamed them now, so you won't get killed as much. Not many humans get killed anyhow. Like the crocodiles are kind of big. Um, so imagine this, okay? Imagine the Philippines before it was like colonized by humans. What would have been there? Imagine the animals that we have. Okay, so these are the sort of things, like make it, choose something controversial, especially in our history, Philippine history, like and use it and apply it to historic piracy issues in Basilan. You this is the piracy thing is very common. If you can't beat them, join them, which is exactly what happened to Nigeria, Somalia, the Somalian pirates. Okay, when you look at the eastern coast of Africa, right, you probably would ask, why would they be such pirates? I mean, that's so greedy. It's not, because once upon a time there was no piracy in Somalia. Okay, it was a thriving country, like food wise and everything. And fishing was their greatest, like their greatest industry. But you know what happened? I think sometime in the 80s or 90s, they discovered that they can send the ships closer to Somalian coast, so that it would be cheaper and it's a lot less risky for the boats, like crossing on, through on open seas. So they took that road because it's faster also to get to around Cape York and all that. So what happened? Like it destroyed the entire fishing industry of that western area. So it's not just Somali pirates that's joining them; it's all the others that got affected by that issue. Um, so then they started stealing ships and all that with whatever they can get to, just so that they could provide for their families. So you can take something like that, as part of our history, world history, and apply it like to your world building. Okay. So in movies, the recent one of probably our best sci-fi films to date, Ali Moore, they talk about that. Piracy. Ad Astra talks about piracy in the moon. Now what does that mean? It means that even though what they're saying in Ad Astra is even though you're such a poor country now, it doesn't mean that you're not gonna go off world. Okay, so that's the thing. The race for the stars is gonna be everyone's race. It's just like what happened with, for instance, airplanes. Everybody's got every country's got an airplane now. Okay, I mean not everyone has gone to the moon yet, but that's eventually gonna happen. Before it was only America and Russia that's trying to get there. Now then it was India. Then there was like there's China, then there's India, then everyone else trying to get in on the action. Even um, Eritrea, I think they're not called Eritrea now, but they have a spaceport and they can launch rockets and stuff like that. Um, so we are most likely we're heading there as well too. So it's just a matter of which city sets it up first. Okay, so when you're picking a particular part of history, it's okay, nice controversy that you want to apply in your story. Read about. There's always two sides to the story. Like for example, with Japan and coming into the war, you know, like that did not happen if America allowed Japan before World War II to keep buying stuff to modernize its army or its navy and air force. But they stopped it. They stopped everything. They put sanctions on them, much like America's put sanctions on Putin, on Russia. So they were forced to basically like draw plans to take over other countries with resources because they're running out. And that's as a result of their modernization and whatnot, like building up the army. Uh, and at the time, Woodrow Wilson, I think, was the president there. He was a bit racist. They didn't like the Japanese very much. But there's also those kind of stories, right? So the ones closer to home, President Manuel Quezon. So he's hailed as the Schindler of Asia. Now Schindler, as you know, is like there was a movie made about him. He saved like hundreds of Jews apparently, and President Manuel Quezon is the first ever president in the world to welcome the Jews to allow them to settle and escape the persecutions of the Nazis in Germany. And the Nazis allowed it to happen. President Manuel Quezon wanted 100,000 Jews, but uh, basically the Nazis agreed, okay, 100,000 visas will grant them. We don't want them here, so they can say. But you know who stopped it? The Americans, because they didn't want the Jews coming into the Philippines and then going to America. So they didn't want a flood of Jews coming here and then using the special condition that Philippines had with America, because at the time we were an American colony or protectorate. Um, so they said, no, you can only have 1,000. But here's the thing, and because of that, like Israel is very happy with him and President Manuel Quezon, and he has a statue in Israel as a result of what he did for saving the Jews. But here's the thing. that they don't really talk about much about President Quezon. He wanted the 100,000 Jews so that he could put them in um, in the south, and that's to counter the growing number of Muslim population in the south. So there was always these hidden agendas behind great historical events. So it's cool if you could use take one of those and then use it and in your book, and even use it as a basis for your world building. Um, you know, as an alien world, but using stuff that's happened, say, here in the Philippines. Will sanctions work still in the future? I mean, you know, watch what's happening now and see how effective sanctions are. They're being how they're being applied. What does it lead to? Okay, so these are the sort of things that's great to have in your world building. Uh, you know, when countries are starting to exert their dominance against one another. So, Nanking Treaty, see all the happy white folks and the not so happy Asian guys over here. Okay, pretty horrific stuff. Uh, Something to the stories. The Japanese army that was based in Mindanao ran out of food because they were being. Oh yeah, RC, that's pretty cool. So that when they ran out of food, they started eating like uh, women and babies. I think on just around they had a camp on the hill, and then like they started eating people on the in the villages down where the camp was when they ran out of supplies from the mainland because the Americans were starting to attack them already. So what do I prefer? I like steampunk. Um, I like steampunk. Cyberpunk sometimes can get a bit much for me. Not haven't really seen much of diesel punk. So steampunk, yes. Number two would be cyberpunk. Ready Player One is kind of cool. I like that. All the references to the games that I grew up on. Not much of a gamer, but I recognize these games and how they were played, so that was fun. There you go. Um, and there you go. These are like a few of the 1,000 that eventually made their way to the Philippines, and they was welcomed by President Quezon. Okay, so that leads us now to the Philippine history. So, all right. Anyone else here got questions? Korean history is kind of interesting. Um, Now, let me get this straight. So, Korea was founded by the nobility of Japan. There are a couple of nobilities of Japan that actually founded the kingdom there. And then they just eventually phased out the whole Japanese uh, royalty line and they became Korean. So their history is unique in itself that they don't like they kind of have this animosity between one another and um, but they really came from almost the same people uh, but anyhow but yeah go for it. I think that's great. uh, Reading about another country's history is always fascinating and seeing the similarities some similarities of that history with ours. That's a good thing. So when I was writing my first ever story, which wasn't sci-fi, um, I was kind of fascinated by what kind of history did we really have, and how connected are we to the world? And it wasn't until I started writing my fantasy novel that I realized the extent of our connection to, say, Europe and America and whatnot. Now, America, we always know, like, you know, they're a colony, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But did you know that we supplied before World War II, we had a healthy trade with the Nazis, like for fruit and vegetables and whatnot. And so when they weren't, they were using their battleships because they were really fast. So they were sending them to pick up goods from the Philippines. So this is one of the things why you wonder how could President Quezon ask the Germans for 100,000 visas, and they just went, sure, man, no problem, bang. There's always a reason why that would be done so quickly, and that's because we have a healthy relationship in terms of trade with Germany. Um, and yeah, so things like that. So it was we're heavily connected with the rest of the world. I mean, you know, you only have to think about what we did for Israel, right? We were also the tie-breaking vote, President Romulo, that made Israel a nation, a very strong nation as it stands now. They were recognized as a state by the United Nations, 51 to 50 vote. I can't remember, something like that. So the Philippines was a tiebreaker, like for that. For that country. Now, another sources of great history from just our relatives, like my Tito Pete here, and Tito Ben, and also Lolo Andoy, who used to live in Ruby Street, and especially the stories about how they survived the Japanese occupation. And you think you got it tough now, like when we lose our internet, it's like our whole world goes. Oh, back then, you know, it's like if you got mistaken as as a rebel supporter, you were made to run out to say the railroad tracks here in Maria Clara, Sao Paulo, and then they'll shoot you like as you're running. And so, you know, the places that we take for granted now. I used to live in Ruby Street. Like the mud is about half a meter, half a meter, like thick. So if you drop your fork in the mud, that's it. You can't find it anymore. So things like that it, you know, like just talking to relatives about their experience during the war, it is fantastic. You have an insight of how life was like, and you can take that life that they have, project that in say a future colony out in yeah, I don't know, Proxima Centauri or something, and then like make them go through the same crap, you know, like how they would survive, how the natives there would survive, like from us colonizing them. What would be in this instance where we're going to look like the Japanese colonizing them? What are we going to do? Like how do we? I mean, how would we behave? That sort of thing. A history bogged down by the past. Now, one thing you gotta understand with Philippine history, and the way I view it is, we have a lot of hang-ups. Because I guess from like the different colonial powers that have um colonized us, uh, we've got a lot from them. They got a lot from us. But what we tend to do is look to the past a lot. It doesn't mean that we're not gonna go ahead, get ahead of ourselves and go into the future or go off world. Um, like for example, the jeepney in the Philippines. Okay, that that has been invented in the 40s, 50s, and the equivalent design of that was the Woody, which was a station wagon in the States. and the Woody's design was discontinued in the 50s. Um, Yet we still kept going with the design of the jeepney. There was, I don't know, it became like part of our culture because there were so many jeepneys that were left behind by the Americans when we declared independence and they all went back to America. All these surplus we just ended up using as our own. Uh, then we started to modify them. And I guess with all that effort put into something like the jeepney, it became part of us. So what does that mean? Well, we could see jeepneys flying around as air cars, because that's part of our culture. So that's interesting. It's always interesting to note that in the Philippines, something that's become ingrained in us, whether it be religion or a technological device. Like it's very hard to get rid of them. Um, the other problem, of course, is because we've been a colony for so many times, so many instances in history that we become reliant to on our colonizers to provide for us and protect us and all that. So we've never really, and America being the last of our the colonizers, we've always looked for aid outside when it comes to disasters instead of like investing on our own way of helping people. So is that going to change? I don't know because we've been like that for 400 years, 500 years. Every time there's a major problem, it's like yes, always seems to be a great deal of problem providing for those people. Okay, so for the people that were hit, victims that were hit by tragedy, there's always that problem. Why? I mean, it's been 400 years. Like, couldn't we have evolved an emergency disaster system, that sort of thing? Like, I addressed that in uh, one of my stories in my book. So, you know, just that it's kind of frustrating, but again, that's something that you could build into your world. 100 years have passed, and say they still don't have running water in that colony, even though there's a lake nearby. How come they haven't built a decent irrigation system yet? What's the issue? Um, okay, and then use the history of the pandemic in the. Uh, oh, let me see something here. Okay, change the direction of history. So one example. So one example, of course, is using the history of the pandemic in the Philippines and a way forward. What are we going to do? Um, it's a good way to use history because it allows you to maybe hammer in your point, especially if you're trying to create a world where you're trying to tell a story that they need to change their ways so that things would get better. Okay, I'm using the pandemic here because the problem that we had during the pandemic, like people getting sick and mass infections and all that happening, no vaccine, that happened before in the 1920s, 1919, 1920, the flu epidemic, the Spanish flu. We got hit in the Philippines with that because of our extensive trade with Spain and everyone else as well. Um, it's because of our trade with Europe, not just sorry Spain. It's like Spain's of course one European country we trade with, but it was like everybody got hit and it was bad. Lots of people also died. So you'd think that 100 years into the future, no doubt the science fiction writers of that time would have been saying, "Oh yeah, we would have had a multiple epidemic control centers already in the Philippines that can produce the vaccines that we need whenever this kind of crap happens again." No, okay. So how do you take that and project that, say, to a colony in a distant world in I don't know, Aldebaran system or something, and then 100 years into settling there, they still haven't created a decent vaccine, even though a forest is nearby that they can concoct all these things, these medicine. How come they haven't done it yet? How come they haven't created centers yet, and their population is growing? That sort of thing, you know. Um, a lot of the stuff that happens in the world, like that is global, um, happen to us as well. So that's how we're connected. That's how Philippine history is connected to the world. It's just because of trade. We have extensive trade around the world. So it's not that we are an isolated small Southeast Asian country. It's like all the Southeast Asian countries trade with everyone else in the world since World War II. Since the American hegemony like became prevalent in the world, trade, sea trade, and all that sort of stuff had really improved greatly, and so everyone was able to trade, and so with that, then everyone was able to touch everyone's lives in terms of cultural exchange and whatnot. So, um, so things are, sadly, things like pandemics, it can get carried by boats and whatnot to different countries. Um, okay, so using the Philippine history as both entertainment and education for the masses. I mean, I know everyone knows it is now more into K drama and whatnot, but we have a lot of stories to tell as well too, and that's why I keep saying I'm more of a storyteller than I am a writer. You know, I'd like to write stories, even based on partially based on some historical stuff here in the Philippines. Because I think we have something great that we can market to the world. I think we are ready, considering all the other nations have had their own versions of fantasy and sci-fi. Korea certainly is taking off in a big way. China is also starting to do that. Some of their books are being translated into English, like to for entertainment value because they're really good. So no doubt that I'm probably some of these people in the comments areas are going to write like bestsellers, New York Times bestseller, and blow away everyone. And oh wow, so this is like Philippine sci-fi and or Philippine fantasy, and it's really cool. So something like that. So it do not hesitate to use like our history to educate not just our massa, but maybe people around the world. Tell them what it was like for us. In 2023, coming from being a Muslim enclave of kingdoms, Muslim kingdoms spread out to being Christianized, and then all of a sudden, like here we are. Um, as a jeepney back in the 1950s, and that's a jeepney in 2023s. Right? So we tend to get attached. So, which Philippine history is cool. Um, Not many people know what actually happened to us pre-colonial period. I mean, if you ask a high school student what we were, it's like you probably know that we were there were like a lot of Muslims here, like a lot of Malay different nations. Even the Chinese were trading with us. And we were a nation. I don't, but it was like many nations like comprised the Philippines. We were like an archipelago of nations. So it'd be good to talk to historians about how we were. We were like Europe with our own different languages. We had 7 distinct languages, and then it was whittled down to three or four, or three, because the Spaniards wanted to have full control of where they were. The only ones they weren't really able to control are the southern folks. Okay, so it's great to use something like what we have, like in terms of if you're building a colony, if you build it as like an archipelago colony of nations, or do you have one united kind of country? So I guess it depends on who goes off into space first. If the Visayan people or the Cebuanos get to go into space first, then I doubt that in the way we currently think, then I doubt that the Cebuanos will like to associate themselves as Filipinos because they founded that particular country in Titan, say, and it's all Cebuanos that are there, and they built their culture around that place. So it might be like that because right now, as a nation, I think the Northerns don't like the Southerns, and then the Cebuanos don't really like the Northerns as well. The people from Luzon, so because they feel like for whatever reason, um, Tagalog is being imposed on them on the South, which is, yeah, it's understandable. But you get what I mean. It's like if we start going off world, then we're gonna have this problem where the Cebuanos might create their own country off world as a colony. Then the ones from Mindanao will do the same thing. They'll have their own colony. So based on what's happening here. Okay, that's why I always say in I don't really say it in my book, but I always say during talks with fans and whatnot, we need to fix the problems here first before we go off world, because once we go off world, it's gonna be magnified. Um, the problems that we have here will be magnified maybe 10 times or 100 times more. Uh, the other analogy I can think of this is back when the days when there was no website. Okay, I remember a consultant once telling me, because I was pushing for companies to have a website, and he goes, "Be careful, because when you start to expose your website, which contains all your company information out there on the ether, then they can see problems more in your company. You'll magnify the problems that you have um, inside your own little company, like out. That becomes like people can see more what's wrong with you if you use the services and it says something different on your website, then it kind of spreads that you saw. You know, much the same way I think when we go off world, if we haven't fixed our problems here, um, then we're gonna most likely end up the same way. In terms of culture building in the future, here's another thing. Religion is very much a part of like our life, and so when you're trying to colonize the world, another world or another planet with has no intelligent, no sentient habitants there, you might need to look at like whether you want to impose your religion on them, or like what kind of religion are you going to put on them, that sort of thing. Oh, um, that just freaked out. So that's another thing that to keep in mind with when you're world building. Um, Additionally, look at the history of the people, like just in Luzon and in the South. Uh, in Mindanao book fair that I went to, they basically, one person I spoke to said, "Oh yeah, we're Tausos and we're very proud. We'll never associate with like just any other tribe, and we are ready to fight." And he goes, "I don't know if we'll. That's why I don't know if we'll ever be able to work together in terms of going off world. I said, well, that may be so, but have you heard of Klingons? I mean, they're pretty warlike as well too. So even though we have warlike tribes, I said to him, we have warlike tribes in the south, or even in Cebu. It doesn't mean that they don't have their place off world. They could be our space marines, our very own space marines that would defend us because they're more willing to take risks in battlefield. You know, that sort of thing. So just because you're part of a tribe, it doesn't mean you can't take that pride and aggression and project it out into like colonizing the place. That's all. That's yeah. Anyway, so that's something to think about. We are in the agrarian angle, which is we're in a farming country, always seen as a farming country. We still rely on land, but it's not always going to be like that. So what happens when the farmlands run out? This is discussed in the movie Alimuom. So rising food costs. We were in things like historically we were once a great rice producing country, and then now we're not. So things like that. Nothing seems to last forever in terms of what we do here in the Philippines. It's not kind of like not sustainable, even though we have a lot of resources. We can't seem to harness those resources well enough to improve ourselves. And that's maybe something that you can address in your book and using our history. Philippine mining. We have lots and lots of things that are great to mine here, but we can't access them properly because corruption and things like that. So that's another thing that we need to probably that you can explore when you're writing a book in terms of resources. What happens when a country like the Philippines is discovered, say in the Alpha Centauri region of space? How do we take advantage of it? You know, and how do we do it here? If we happen to be the first to go over there, how would we do it? Given our experience with mining here, what would we do as a nation? Uh, Philippine history, future history. In summary, here we go. History always repeats itself, okay? So again, you only have to look back at the what we did during the pandemic. We're still tribal. We're always going to be tribal. Um, I don't see that changing, but it shouldn't stop us going off world. But one thing that might be good is to study the different tribes and how they might be able to contribute in terms of how they behave when we go off world. What would we need them for? Like, there are tribes that are really great at cooking. Some tribes are great at building things. Some tribes are great at fighting, that sort of thing. So um, cultural change is always going to be hard, but it doesn't mean we won't get the space. Um, might carry some baggage with us. It's just a matter of minimizing the damage of that baggage, when we go off world. Thank you all, and long live 8 letters lit fest. And got any questions? Like, feel free. Email me. You can also email me on. Let me type in. Can I type my thing here? Oh well. Anyway, you can send us an email, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. I'm on Facebook. Just look me up, Renato Tranquilino. And I've also got an author Renato Tranquilino. So yeah. Enjoy and have a good one. So anyway, yeah, questions. If there are no questions, I guess we can close off this session. And again, I appreciate your time and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thanks, Aya. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Julia. Thanks, Mark.